Congress is back in session. Deals are being negotiated, and there is plenty to talk about on the White House side. So we got to bring in our friend Bill Scher. Welcome back to the show, buddy.
Always a pleasure.
All right, so let's actually start on the White House side before we get into any of the negotiations that are happening. We had a very curious unfolding of events over the weekend with Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin, who it was revealed in I believe a Friday news dump, had been hospitalized. It continues to develop throughout the weekend that not only was he still hospitalized, we don't know why or what the initial surgery was that put him in the hospital, and there was a lack of communication not only further up his chain of command with the White House, but also below with the woman who assumed his responsibilities. Where does this rank? Can you're another a historian with this kind of stuff. Have you ever heard of anything similar to this? Like what rings a bell when it comes to a story like this?
There are examples of presidents not being forthright with the public about their incapacitation, but I'm not as aware of with underlings. I mean, there might be other examples, but just never got a whole lot of attention because they're kind of sideshows. And I think this is going to be a sideshow at the end of the day. It's not the thing we're going to be talking about, on October 31st, 2024. But Biden is but Biden is trying to kick off the general election campaign season with these two set speeches where he's elevating the importance of democracy being on the ballot, and here's an unforced error gumming up the works, crowding out finite news space that's dulling the message. I'm not saying it means like Biden's going to lose, but it's not what he really wants to have happen this week when he kind of geared up for a big event.
I think the bigger story here is that we know about it. Because that's the thing that seems odd to me is that, sure, look, have secretaries of state, secretaries of defense been AWOL at certain times for various different reasons. Washington, D.C. is certainly not a town that is immune for somebody having a routine checkup that might actually mean a facelift or something like that. Things like that do happen. However, the fact that we know about it, and this is me reporter-wise kind of reading between the tea leaves, when you're getting that much detail out of the Pentagon, that means the Pentagon was annoyed about it. That means people in the Pentagon were really annoyed about it. And the fact that we didn't immediately see a circling around from the administration saying, no, we were aware about this, that, and the other. This is less of a thing than you would think, also means that they weren't aware of it. And I don't know. It just seemed like Well,
I think the primary goal of the White House was to insulate the president, to make absolutely clear the second this story went public, Biden did not know. He was not part of this cover-up in any way. And there's been no deviation of that. Every party has. I mean, I'm not just suggesting they're lying, but if there's one aspect of the story that's had coordinated, clear communication, is that Biden did not know, and no one is questioning that.
Yeah. Yes. So, I don't know. I mean, at its worst, to me, it seems indicative of an administration that is either not on the same page or more used to, either lying, I guess, either white lying or scared of other people taking their jobs. I mean, like that's the only thing that something like this says to me. And the fact that it gets out means that there's a lack of discipline.
Well, I don't know all the details yet, and none of us do. I wonder if there was a part of this that is unusual because more and more of us are doing work while we are doing other things, on vacation, feeling sick, in the hospital. We're so interconnected. We think I can get by. I can play through this. no one needs to know because I'm still I'm still doing my basic things, and then this particular elective procedure went awry, and it went off the rails, and so he had to cop to the fact that he wasn't on top of things.
Yeah, but based on the reporting, he had the procedure, went back home, then felt bad and went back to the hospital. You would think that at the moment that you go back to the hospital, that's when you start phoning people around. I don't know. Look, I am not a military man, but from everything I've heard, chain of command's kind of a big deal over there.
Well, right, but from the beginning of the process, when he first had the surgery, his MO was, I'm not going to tell anybody. Like, that's where his headspace was. And so he tried.
Yes.
So he clearly tried to keep that going for as long as he possibly could. And he took it to, I mean, probably should have said something in the first place, but clearly took it too far.
All right. Let's switch to the stuff that this story was crowding out. You've seen Joe Biden do some more events, try to anchor his speech. Obviously, there's been a lot of dialogue, a story that included commentary by former President Barack Obama saying that he was afraid of the trajectory of the Biden 24 campaign. And then on the Sunday shows this week, the spokesperson for Biden 24 saying that this is going to be all gearing toward the State of the Union that'll happen in 2 months. Is 2 months too far away for him to reframe his argument, or are we being prisoner of the moment because Iowa's starting now and so the clock has officially begun on 2024?
Well, I would say the opposite. Here's Biden starting a general election framing before the first vote has been cast in the primary season. Everyone's expecting it to be a Trump-Biden rematch, and Biden's not waiting around for it to be formally declared. He's already getting it going, and I don't think that's wrong. I don't think that's a bad strategy. One of the reasons why I think Biden's numbers are a little are flat vis-a-vis Trump is that a lot of the focus has been on Biden and not so much on a lot of the crazier and crazier things Trump has been saying. And here is Biden's way of saying, and apparently this has been happening, behind the scenes. There was an article in Semaphore saying that Biden's been meeting with journalists and trying to work the refs a little bit and say, hey, why aren't you Trump said these things which are like truly bonkers. Why aren't you giving this the same equivalent amount of attention? And I think we would get to that point anyway, because once it is a general election campaign, once there are two clear nominees, then the media emphasis does start to shift. So far in the past couple of months, it's been Israeli Gaza, it's been Biden's numbers, it's been why aren't people giving him credit for the economy? It's all the glass half empty side of the Biden situation, and a lot less about what Trump has been saying in terms of being a quasi-authoritarian. And I do think that's going to shift organically. Biden's trying to accelerate that process.
Do you think that this is a framing issue? Because I kind of feel like Biden's that this is not an issue. If you're trying to work the refs and say Donald Trump has said crazy stuff, I agree. He has said crazy stuff, but I kind of feel like that's priced in, and a lot of the other stuff that's been out there is more newsworthy. The record and people's feelings on the economy are more newsworthy than what Donald Trump is saying on Truth Social.
I don't think it's fully priced in. I think what you articulated there, I'm sure, plays on reporters and editors' minds, either consciously or subconsciously. This doesn't feel new to me, that Trump is acting like a dictator, and so I'm not going to give it page A1 treatment. But in the Real Clear Politics polling average over the entirety of 2023. We've had five lead changes between Trump and Biden. That's actually pretty unusual for a general election trial heat period. And sure, for a lot of us, for most of us, this is priced in. Our minds are made up. There isn't a massive swing vote out there, but there is some swing vote out there. And the swing vote between I'm choosing between Trump or Biden. There's swing vote between I'm choosing between Trump are staying home or Biden are staying home or flirting with third-party candidates. There is movement out there, and that movement is affected by what is taking precedence in media coverage. So there is value in Biden trying as much as he can to, and this is what, and Obama should know this too, because people were talking trash about Obama's prospects for a period of time early on, how the shine was off, and he had to worry about youth turnout and black turnout, all that stuff. All that was happening too. And that campaign said, this can't be a referendum. This has to be a choice. This cannot be a referendum on the incumbent. This is a choice between me and the other guy. And here's Biden following that playbook and saying,
yeah,
but no one's perfect. No one gets an A+ when you're president of the United States, but it's between me and this whack job over here.
But let me ask you this, because we, coming out of 2016, especially in the journalism world, had this a gigantic reckoning of, oh, well, we covered him too much. We let him totally define the news cycle. Donald Trump said something crazy, and we rushed over with cameras. We made him the center of attention. We made sure that he was the end-all and be-all of the political news calendar, and that was detrimental. That was empowering to Donald Trump. Now the strategy from the Biden White House is, no, can we get more of that?
Well, people, on the left, broadly speaking, those who are highly online and highly sensitive, highly prone to media criticism, they tend to jump at whatever is the criticism du jour. So it's either you're covering him too much, or you're not covering him enough. You're giving him free airtime. Oh, you overlooked this crazy thing that he said. Like, there's no winning.
Yeah.
And look, Trump's been on the political scene now since 2011, when he was pushing the birther conspiracy on Barack Obama. We're way past the argument, are we normalizing him or not? He is the dominant figure of the Republican Party. He is most likely the Republican presidential nominee. He has, just based on current polling, a 50-50 shot at minimum of becoming president of the United States. You should cover what he is saying. Mm-hmm. He deserves just as much coverage as any other presidential frontrunner should get, which is a lot.
I guess, have we not? Like, I guess what is more? What is more of the coverage? I mean, and maybe I'm on the leading edge because I follow it, but I kind of feel like I know every time that he says something wacky. I don't feel like I am lacking for it.
I'm not super critical of the amount of coverage he has got up to this point. I mean, and I also think that the media does a pretty good job of not just being transcribers, but putting it in context and fact checking him in real time. There's lots of coverage about Trump saying something that wanted to be a dictator for a day. I've heard a lot of coverage most recently about we could have negotiated the Civil War. And I'm just hearing coverage this morning about how he said, I hope that there's a Great Depression on Biden's watch and not on my watch. Like, it gets coverage. It's not, we know about it because it gets covered. I'm not saying the media is bad because they gave a hot war in Israel, Gaza more attention. That was the number one story, and the Trump crazy thing was the number 2 or number 3 story. Like, that's fair. But it is, as we get close to Election Day, I do think that ratio is going to even out. And I think it's understandable that from Biden's perspective, he wants to accelerate the process of it evening out because he thinks there are things that Trump is saying that are going to redound to his benefit. And so every politician tries to do things to shape media coverage. That's legit. Now the media doesn't have to just salute, but good candidates do things that influence media coverage to their benefit, and that's all Biden is trying to do right now.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's leave the West Wing and head to Capitol Hill. Both the Senate and the House today will be back in their chambers, and they've got a lot on their plate. A deadline that is bearing down on the House to try to keep the government open. But let's focus on the foreign aid. Late last year, the decision was made to tie aid for Ukraine, which has become less popular, to aid to Israel and Taiwan, and immigration. Immigration was the new way that, at least at the point, border security. The border security was used as what was thought to be a sweetener for Republicans in the House to get this aid package through. It has become its own Gordian knot. Where do you view this, Scher? What are the dimensions of this particular debate?
Well, I'm slightly optimistic they're gonna land this plane. They're gonna get to a deal.
Okay.
Obviously, people are working very hard to get to that deal. It might seem irrelevant to connect foreign aid to border security, but I do think there is political logic to it. You see on the America First side of the argument, we shouldn't give one dime to Ukraine until we take care of our own border, and so that might
help
really,
America. Yeah,
right. That might rub you the wrong way if you're not if you're an America Firster, and you know that this is coming from a lot of bigoted anti-immigrant sentiment. But if you can link those two things, you are debunking the America First frame. You are saying, you know what, we actually can do both things. We actually can make sure that Putin doesn't steamroll Europe and make sure we are managing the flow of migration on our border. So I think there's, and layer on top of that, that some of Biden's worst numbers are on his handling of the border and immigration. I think he has a lot of incentive to do this deal. And then you might say, well, why do Republicans have incentive to do this deal? Don't they want to use immigration as a political weapon for taking out Biden? And this is where the America First framing may backfire on them, because while Trump and others don't want Ukraine aid, this is a divided Republican Party in terms of foreign policy, and there are a whole lot of Republicans that do want Ukraine aid, particularly in the Senate. And so they're taking the America First framing and turning it on its head and saying, if that's what you want, fine, we'll actually do it. And so if we actually get this deal done in the Senate, which is the lowest hanging fruit, relatively speaking, obviously the harder job is getting it through the House, which is more Ukraine skeptical and more nativist and more Trump friendly. But I do think there's going to be just a massive amount of pressure from the national security minded Republicans, the anti-Putin Republicans, on Speaker Mike Johnson to say, this is the best we're going to get on the border. Biden's made a whole lot of concessions here, and we just cannot have. So we're on board. This is being sold to the public as a bipartisan deal. If this gets tanked, it's on you. You will take personal responsibility for abandoning Ukraine and letting Putin run roughshod over Europe. Is that what you want your legacy to be? I think that's a lot to shoulder. And so far, Mike Johnson has been cooperative on these other aspects of keeping the government open, where he's sort of moved away from his past record and say, okay, I know I got to be the responsible adult here and keep the government open. So I think he's open to that kind of influence and pressure. So again, I can't tell you I know it's going to work out this way, because it all kind of rests on what's going on inside of Mike Johnson's mind, which I can't be a mind reader. But that's where I see that path.
The news today from some of the reporters on the Hill is that this deal has hit a snag, specifically in terms of the Republicans in the Senate, as you mentioned, the lowest hanging fruit, because they want to push for more restrictions on Biden's executive discretion when it comes to allowing certain kinds of migrants in during health crises or anything else. This has been the red line with Biden's allies, Democrats in the Senate, who are very wary about any kind of immigration deal that they do not have their hands on. Do you think that this deal can happen without Biden pressing those progressive Democrats in the Senate?
I mean, this is a hard deal. It's going to get attacked from left and right once it's done. Biden had already been trying to carve out a middle path on the border. Quite frankly, it's reminiscent of Dick Morris's triangulation from the Clinton era, where by executive order, Biden was saying. So I mean, let me just sort of back up here. Like, this is a genuine crisis. This is genuinely unprecedented, the amount of migrant influx that's come in over the past couple of years. Back in 2018, when Trump was talking about, oh my gosh, the caravan's coming, that was like 50 people. Like that was there's a lot of hysteria on the border that's often not tethered to facts. This is an actual giant influx, and it's putting actual strain on municipal services.
Yeah.
There's so many. I'm sorry to go on for a long time. There's so many layers to this. It's such a complicated issue, which is why it's so politically difficult.
No, go.
We actually have a tight labor market right now. There are a lot of employers that would love to have more migrants do work. So it's not like we can't handle more people. I heard Lindsey Graham say the other day, we're full. We're not full. There's not a finite amount of America, a finite amount of American economy. People can come, people can fill jobs, people can grow the economy. If you didn't have that growth, you'd be shrinking, and you'd be a dying country, and you wouldn't actually like living in that country. So we can't handle it. The trick is when they first come in. You just show up, and you need a bed, and the bed isn't immediately there for you. That puts real strain on municipal governments. That it's the initial intake that's the problem right now, and it's a real problem. So Biden has been trying to make it more orderly by saying, okay, you can't. There's a thing called asylum, which is there's international law and domestic law. If you're being truly persecuted, you can just show up. No appointment necessary, and say my life is in danger and I need asylum. Your case gets adjudicated, but that takes time, and so while you wait around, the Trump folks call that catch and release, when it's really just you got to have your case adjudicated. But a lot of people are coming in for asylum, and their life's not really in danger.
And sometimes that can be years.
Correct, it can be. Although Biden's tried to accelerate that process, but it's still challenging to have the judges available to adjudicate the case.
Yeah.
Now, if you're coming because you want a job, it's not really being persecuted. And so there's an argument, more from the right than the left, but I do think it has credence, that, asylum's being abused here. It's not meant for, I just need work. It's meant for being persecuted. And a lot of people lose their asylum cases. So Biden is trying to say, you know what, let's try to put a damper on the asylum track and say, okay, you want to ask for asylum, do it before you get here. We're going to put up some centers in other countries. We're going to make an app that you can apply for. But if you have a legal means to getting here,
you should maybe remain in Mexico.
Right. Well, remain in Mexico, which was Trump's policy, was you have to sit in Mexico while your case gets adjudicated, which could be years. Biden thinks a little different, where he was trying to say, if you have a way to get here legally through this app or through a humanitarian parole, and I can get to that, and you come here without taking those means, we're going to send you back, and then you go use those legal means. So that's sort of where he kind of was being right-leaning and tighter. But at the same time, he was using this tool called humanitarian parole, which is an executive authority to say, I'm going to suspend immigration law for you for a couple of years. Just that's not going to count for you. It's like being paroled from prison. You can be on parole. You can walk around for a time. You eventually have to go back, but you can walk around for right now. And he did that for certain countries where the migration had really jacked up since the pandemic: Cuba, Haiti, Nicaragua, Venezuela. So he's opening the valve here and he's tightening it over here. So the right got mad on one thing, the left got mad on the other thing, and he's being sued on both ends of that. So it may be after a few months that the court will say you can't do this. But that's what he's. But the premise that Biden's working under is not that migration is inherently bad, but that it needs to be more orderly. Whereas the Trump argument is migration is bad. This is poison. You're poisoning our country. We want you to not come here. So reconciling these viewpoints is very difficult. There's not a natural common ground there. And so where you're getting this friction is how much humanitarian parole authority should Biden have? And chances are Biden's going to accept limitations on it because he's in such a political jam. He needs that Ukraine aid. He needs a more orderly border. He's getting hammered in the polls. And if he can get it, and to your initial point, there's people on the left that are going to be mad about it. And he's not going to get unanimous Democratic support. But there are a lot of Democrats in the middle, particularly people who are on the ballot, like John Tester and Sherrod Brown, who want this kind of deal. In Montana and Ohio, people who need to win re-election, most likely if the Democrats are going to keep the Senate. And a lot of other Democrats who sort of recognize, you know what, I know this sucks, but there's no way out without putting a cap on this situation. You know, the New York City mayor, the Chicago mayor, it's not just Republicans complaining. Massachusetts has right to shelter. They're very strained. There's the problem is going to it's going to be a narrative so long as both Republicans and Democrats are publicly complaining, and so Biden's got to put a tourniquet on it.
Has it surprised you to see some of the numbers on immigration, about migration and even deportations, that now with independence has a favorable rating in some of the polls that I've seen? These issues, at least for most of my even my youth life following politics in like 1992 with Pat Buchanan, this was looked at as a far right, a racial fixation that now has fairly broad approval for some kind of immediate action, up to and including deportation.
Well, because one, the strain is real. There are, and this is part of the perverse logic of what Texas Governor Greg Abbott has been the biggest driver of, shipping people from the border into other cities, and forcing the strain onto them.
Yeah.
And look, it's legit for. Texas shouldn't have to shoulder the entire burden, but ideally you'd coordinate this in a way so you'd really spread the responsibility around and not just try to score political points by dumping people on the vice president's lawn in Washington, D.C. But the reality is that there is strain in blue areas and red areas and purple areas like Arizona. So you hear it in the media more than usual. And what I just tried to explain to you took a long time to explain. You can't easily explain the situation in 30 seconds. And so it's very hard for Biden to give a kind of speech like I just gave and try to put it in some kind of larger context. You're going to have higher disapproval numbers until there's an actual reduction of the flow and an actual ability for people in cities and states that are acutely affected to actually manage the initial intake.
With all of that you just said, and I do think that was well articulated, that it is hard to spell out all the details here. There are a lot of vectors. Nobody is saying that the border is a simple process. And yet, you have seen this become a problem on Biden's watch. You have the person that was Mr. I'm strong on the border that will be running against him, his predecessor in Donald Trump. Is there a fear from the strategic wing of Biden 24 that they have to run against, well, Trump was right on the border?
Well, I don't think they have to say Trump was right. I mean, maybe they can do a more...
No, they have to combat. They have to combat that.
Yeah, I think most importantly is just to actually reduce the flow. So you're not having drip stories of coming out of New York and Chicago and Boston of Democrats actively complaining about the situation. Because anytime it's dem-on-dem conflict, that's going to attract news. So you want to get that off the news. So if there is an actual deal and if it actually works, and this is sort of the hard thing. Like, you could say, okay, we're going to clamp down on humanitarian parole authority. Biden can't just let a whole bunch of people in from these countries. And I should also add one thing I left out before. One of the reasons why Biden's initial plan started to work and then kind of stopped working is that the migrants are coming from farther and farther away. Now they're coming from China and Africa. the pandemic has ravaged the political economic situations in so many countries, and they're going to where the economy is actually good, which is America. If America had a terrible economy, there weren't jobs here, people wouldn't be coming.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's a testament to how Biden's managed the economy. But if you clamp down humanitarian parole, but people still come, and they come even more illegally than legally than what had surface broad appeal in Congress. If it doesn't work in practice and the problem is still dripping on you, that doesn't really help. So what's tough about this is actually coming up with a plan that's going to work and actually manage the flow in an orderly way. Yeah. So I think they can finally come up with some sort of committee product that they can eke through Congress, but does it actually work in practice? That's what's tough.
Oh, well, we'll all find out together now, won't we? But yes or no, you do believe that something will get through.
I mean, I'm not gonna say go to Vegas and put money down on it, but I think that there are enough pieces in place, there are enough factors, there are enough people in positions of power that want this deal to happen. There are Democrats that want this deal to happen for electoral reasons and for foreign policy reasons. There are Republicans that actually are old school Reaganite conservatives that want to defeat Putin. There are people like Kyrsten Sinema. Yeah. I think Kyrsten Sinema is in the middle of this, is waiting to announce her reelection campaign until she gets this deal done and say, look at me, I did just one more deal. I just keep banging out deals. You need people like me who
exactly,
play up the middle. Yeah. So there's lots
bipartisan with results.
Right.
Yeah.
There's lots of people that want this deal. And obviously people that don't. The Trumpers really don't want the Trump. I mean, people talk with the left are going to get mad at Biden about this. Trump is going to go ballistic if this deal gets done. And there's going to be, so I talked about pressure on Mike Johnson from the foreign policy types. He's going to get pressure from Trump too. You know, you're backstabbing me. You're giving Biden a win here. Why are you doing that? So again, I'm not saying it's an easy calculation for anybody here. But I do think being told that, like, you will go down in history as the person who allowed Putin to take over the world, that's pretty heavy.
It is. But we know more about it now, thanks to our friend Bill Scher, Washington Monthly, and so much more. Bill, where can people find you?
I'm the politics editor of the Washington Monthly, WashingtonMonthly.com. You can also find my work on social media, Bill Scher at Twitter, Bill Scher Media on Threads. And I recently was in Politico. I'm still a contributing writer there. I had my overview of the 2028 presidential election a few weeks ago in Politico. So check that out.
I love it. And you got that prime slot during the holidays where that story stayed A1 for like 48 hours. Well, it was amazing. Every time I went to Politico, I just smiled.
I've done that year-end story for Politico for 5 years now. It's usually about looking as far ahead as possible. It's kind of like Will Smith used to own July 4th.
As possible.
I own Politico like December 30th. Like that's my thing.
That's it. You love to see it. All right. Thank you so much, Bill.
My pleasure. Take care.